Ooh. Holy sh. Alright. What is going on, everyone? My name is Turk. This is the Level 1 Gaming channel, and I wanted to talk a little bit about Nintendo. Now, I love Nintendo. I'm a huge fan of Nintendo, and I especially kind of enjoy when they make weird decisions or just do things that make zero sense. And I wanted to highlight this point today by showing you a few of their some of the worst commercials that they've ever made. Some of these are really old. Some of them are almost 20, 30 years old. So let's start the first video.
As Nintendo begins to take on new forms, it's important that we can measure how addictive they
Alright, so there's a mouse, maze, and they throw in the mouse there. Goes into Game Boy and what the f?
The new Gameboy Micro. Extremely portable. Extremely stylish.
Oh, holy shit. Okay, hold on. Alright, let's break this down. First of all, that made zero sense. Like the whole point of the advertisement is obviously to try to get you to buy a Game Boy Micro. How the f is this supposed to convince me to buy a Game Boy Micro? Okay, so let me scrub back here and let's take a quick look here. Okay, so the mouse is going through the maze here. It goes through the maze. It decides to go for the Game Boy instead of the cheese. Okay, makes sense. But what doesn't make sense is it starts mating with it. And that's putting it very lightly. So what's the point of this? Is the commercial trying to say the Game Boy Micro is so small that a mouse will want to, you know, get busy with it? Like, where's the logic there? What's convincing me to get the Game Boy Micro? Which, by the way, if you don't know what the Game Boy Micro was, it was essentially a Game Boy Advance that was shrunk down to maybe about like 3 or 4 inches big. It was like very, very portable, and it pretty much failed. I actually liked the idea of the Game Boy Micro, but I had a Game Boy Advance SP, which was pretty good. It suited all my needs. But the Game Boy Micro, yeah, I always thought it was a good idea, but you know, apparently it didn't sell well, and now we know why. It's because this f***ing commercial was terrible. Okay, next video.
I called the witch doctor, he told me what to do. He said, ooh, ee, ooh, ah, ah, tang, tang, walla, walla, bing, bang.
That means play Dr. Mario on Game Boy or NES.
Tang, tang, walla, bang.
I like how they're playing the Game Boys though.
I beat the witch doctor, and this is what
Holy
he
shit.
said. He said, ooh, ee, ooh, ah, ah, tang, tang, walla, walla, bing, bang, ooh, ee, ah, ah. And then he struck my head.
Ooh, okay. Alright, so let's just get this out of the way. First of all, that was racist. I'm not even like a social justice warrior. I'm not politically correct, but you gotta admit, that was pretty racist. So, again, where's the logic here in this commercial? Dr. Mario and a witch doctor, there's no connection there. The only connection this entire commercial has is the word doctor. That's the only thing that is keeping this shitty idea together. You know, they could have easily had like a doctor dressed up in the lab coat like Mario is, fighting, you know, monsters, or like they could have been fighting the red, blue, and yellow viruses and things like that, and made it kind of cool and badass. But what the is this shit? Like, this is terrible. And like, again, the idea, like, setting aside the racist tones, you know, aside here, I'm more concerned with the whole concept itself. Like, Dr. Mario, witch doctor, and that's supposed to convince me to play this puzzle game, which has no connection whatsoever to witch doctors. And again, I gotta admit, I love the way they're playing their Game Boys. They're basically, you know, ripping them apart in their hands. Like, nobody plays Game Boys like that. Nobody plays any video game like that. I hate when they do that shit in commercials and make it way more dramatic than it really is. But that's besides the point. Next video.
What's it
like to play the Nintendo Entertainment?
Okay, so this is a really old commercial with Rob the Robot. And they're making it look really dramatic. What the f? Oh my god. Yeah, that's what happens when you play the NES. You f***ing blast off into space. That's how good it is. That never happened to me when I had an NES. Alright, so let's break this shit down. So I'm going to give this commercial a little bit of slack because this one is much older than the other commercials. The Game Boy Micro one is from like the 2000s, and the Dr. Mario one was from like the 90s. This one is from the mid 80s, so of course it's gonna be super corny and cringeworthy. But let's break this down here. First of all, we have the most dramatic shot I've ever seen of Rob the Robot. This actually makes him look like a badass. But of course, we all know that Rob the Robot is a piece of shit and didn't really work. It only came with like 2 games that it was compatible with, and overall it was just terrible. So moving on here in the commercial, we have these dudes acting way too happy to be playing with Rob the Robot here. And then we got this guy here with the zapper looking way too smug, again, overly dramatic. And he's of course playing Duck Hunt. Now I'm gonna get something off my chest here. Let's all admit that Duck Hunt sucks. It's a terrible ass game. The zapper never really worked, and the game was the kind of Duck Hunt was the kind of game you played for like 10 minutes and then you got bored with it. I know there's a lot of nostalgia involved, and I know we all love to think about Duck Hunt because of the nostalgia, but the game was shit. Let's all admit that. Okay, so let's scrub a little bit more here. We have these guys again being way too happy to be playing Super Mario and a baseball game. I can't tell which one. And yeah, here they go. They launch into outer space because that's what happens when you play the NES. Next video.
I think it's every parent's dream, maybe, to have a doctor in the family.
God. All right. So let's take a closer look at what we got here. So obviously this is Nintendo trying to be cool and hip, and the reason why is because you need to know a little bit of history, console war history here. Now in the 16-bit era, it looked like for about 2 seconds Sega Genesis was going to beat Super Nintendo. And one of the reasons why is that this general kind of idea was that Sega Genesis was for teenagers, it was for older kids, it was for adults, because it had, you know, Mortal Kombat with the blood, and it had more mature games, it had more fighting games, or games that were more geared towards adults, right? And Sega Genesis really, you know, Sega, they really played it up in their commercials. They really made Nintendo out to be like the baby system. And I guess Nintendo got a little shook, and they decided to counteract that with, you know, making their own set of commercials that made them look like badasses. But of course, the problem here is what they did was they turned on MTV for about 5 minutes. They took whatever they saw and slapped it together in a commercial. They saw that, hey, kids are into skateboards and you know, grunge music. Let's just put all that shit on there in that commercial. Let's throw some graffiti in the background, and let's put some cool words in there like "crank it," and you know, that the kids will buy that. Obviously, this isn't Nintendo. This never was Nintendo. I don't know why they even forced this idea, but again, I guess they thought they were potentially going to lose to Sega. But of course, they didn't need to be concerned. Super Nintendo ended up being the better console overall. It had the better game library. It was just that early on, Sega Genesis looked like it was going to maybe not necessarily beat Super Nintendo, but it looked like it was going to be highly competitive. And what we saw was that Sega Genesis kind of floundered, and Super Nintendo kept going pretty good consistently throughout the 16-bit era. Although you could argue now that they're going back to this a little bit with the Nintendo Switch marketing. You know, you've seen all these, you know, millennials and these teenagers playing this Switch, but yeah, but obviously nothing like this. This was super corny. It was literally every single, you know, every single stereotype of the early 90s slapped together. It ends up being the opposite. It looks really lame, it looks really forced, and it didn't work. The whole campaign, as you could tell, it didn't make it. Nintendo stopped marketing that way. So there you have it, folks. 4 shitty ass Nintendo commercials, and it just kind of goes to show you that Nintendo can make some really weird decisions sometimes. If you like this video, like and subscribe, and let us know in the comments below if you enjoyed this, and I'll see you in the next video.